After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and d4, white is playing a Scotch game, so we take the pawn. In this video, we're going to go through stuff we haven't seen before. So in the gambit, the one where they play bishop c4, we have to play bishop c5. And now white plays c3, so that's the gambit, right? Obviously white wants to take control of the center, so you play knight f6, and in the past we've been through e5, d5, and all the things that happen next. Let's look at something we haven't seen. After pawn takes in d4, we play check, and knight c3 is the novelty. We've never seen this before. Now here, we can take the pawn in e4 for free, the knight is pinned. Two options we're going to look at. One of them is queen to b3, continuing the attack on f7, putting pressure. Here we just castle. That's it. And after castle, now the knight is not pinned anymore, and we take it with the bishop, surprisingly. Pawn takes back, but now we're going to recapture the bishop pair from the opponent with knight a5. Wherever the queen goes, queen b4, or either way, you're going to take this bishop, queen takes back, and now simply take control of the center with d5. Now the queen has to move, queen d3, but either way, even queen e2, you're going to play move like rook e8, bishop f5 anyway. You're going to play bishop f5, rook e1, developing. h6 is the best move. You want to give this shelter to the knight in case of future knight h5, but that's not a problem now. Knight d2, putting pressure on the bishop. Knight to d6 is the move to continue. Queen to g3. These are all best moves according to the engine. If white doesn't do that, then they're playing a worse move. Rook to e8, conquering the file, and now there's no coming back here. You can't really develop this bishop anywhere that makes sense. The best move would be to take. And yeah, you threaten it. All there is left to do, I don't know, knight f3 to stop it. But still, knight e4, best moves, winning this pawn. There's many things that can happen now, so we're going to leave it there. And in this position, earlier we went through queen b3. What happens after bishop to d2, putting more defense on the knight? Fine, take, and after take back, obviously with the queen, because then you don't want to lose this pawn. Castle, d5 attacking the bishop, and this is going to be it. Bishop to d3, position is already better for black. Bishop to e6, when they attack the bishop, what are you going to do? Obviously there's no reason to take this knight, so bishop to d6. And let's look at this line, and then we might see some other lines in the future. Knight to b5, attacking the bishop, threatening to win the bishop pair. You play bishop g4, the idea of smashing the king side. And now, what to do? If the knight moves, let's say knight to e5 seems to be making sense, but you just take it. And you win a pawn, it's a crucial central pawn. If instead the knight takes the bishop, you take back with the queen. And you are going to take this knight and smash the pawn structure. If bishop e2 to protect it, but now you play rook a to e8. The idea is to exploit the weak d4 isolated pawn. So basically the plan here is to play rook e4 to simply take the knight, and afterwards this pawn will be free to be taken. And that's inevitable. That pawn is an actual weakness. So let's go on to the next line. So from the start, take, and then bishop c4, bishop c5, and c3. We know we play knight f6 now. Let's just quickly mention another line from the pawn takes variation. Okay, check. What happens when they block with the bishop? Here you simply win this pawn once again. And in the past we have seen this already, but we haven't seen what happens after bishop takes knight. This is not supposed to be good, but basically here's the thing. You take this one, and now you take back, and now white makes a sacrifice. King takes, and now queen b3 recaptures the piece. It is important here that you don't play d5 or something like that. You have to play king f8 because you want to preserve the possibility to play d6. King f8, and after the check, queen e7. And that's it. You're threatening horrible discover check, so you're completely winning here. There is nothing for our opponent to do at this point but to play a losing endgame, because we've got a bishop against the knight. The queens will have to come off the board, and so black has got the better chances here. So back in this position, straight after knight taking in b4 and the bishop sacrifice, what if instead of queen b3, our opponent first gives us a check? Knight e5 check. Okay, king f8, and now queen to b3 threatens checkmate, but you stop everything with queen e7. So that move doesn't work. And that's something that happens a lot, but it doesn't work. Castle, d6, and that's it. You're punishing the opponent. Take in here, take here. And even after queen takes, king takes, and now rook e1, seems like we're going to move the knight, lose this pawn. It's kind of dangerous. The best move is knight f6. And you just up a piece. There's nothing here. Pawn takes, knight d5. Position evaluated simply as if black is up a piece, which he is. So let's go back to this position. Straight after bishop d2 blocking the check. Knight e4, winning the pawn, attacking the bishop. Earlier we went through bishop takes. What happens if the sacrifice comes now? Okay, take back. This is also not supposed to be working. However, queen b3 check should recapture that bishop. You have to play d5 now. And after the bishop recaptures the piece, a5 attacks the bishop. The bishop has to move again. Bishop to d2 in order to give possibility to play knight c3. But either way, you take this one. Knight develops, check. And that's how you punish the opponent. Yes, he gave you a strong attack, but now we're coming back with a very, very expensive bill. King to d1, bishop to g4, pinning the knight can't move. So even if the pawn attacks you, then you're just going to take this pawn. So there's pressure on that pawn. The attack will come on the queen as well. You're going to have to take it from here. You're playing against the isolated pawn. You're going to be able to play moves like queen f6 and queen d4 and capitalize on that pawn. You also might play a move like knight b6 or b6 or knight b4. The position is just better for black, but I can't really go on now. There's too many lines that are possible. We may see something else in the future. So back in this position, earlier we went through straight after playing knight f6, pawn taking. But what about e5 straight away? We have seen it in the past. Now we know we have to play d5. And after bishop to b5, pinning the knight, knight e4 is necessary. Pawn takes, bishop b6. We've seen all of this before, but we've never seen bishop e3 now. Putting more defense over the weak pawn, especially because we want to play bishop g4. Okay, well, castle. I'm pinning the knight, castle. And now bishop g4, putting pressure on that knight. And that's how we're going to capitalize the game. Let's make an example. If h3, you just take. And after queen takes back, knight d4 is a free central pawn that wins the game. If instead after h3 you take the knight and white takes you with the pawn, knight to g5 is the best move. And now there's nothing. If king h2 to protect the pawn in h3, then you can take this pawn for free. You see king here, but then you take this one for free. This cannot be taken back because of this. And so here, what about, let's say, well, if bishop takes, this is completely losing because queen takes with check, king moves, and then once again, knight takes d4 with all the threats of the world. It's devastating. So the best move according to the engine here is to take the knight, of course. So we take back. Now let's see, if knight c3, for instance, right, you just take this pawn for free. Crazy enough. Obviously, queen cannot take because knight f3 wins the game. If bishop takes, then knight h3 check, position evaluated minus 450 for a reason. Obviously, the king going to h2, but then you have ideas like queen h4 with all the discovered checks. King to g2, for instance, knight f4 check. And yeah, that's it. Mate is coming very soon. But here, like even then, after this check, if the king had gone to h2, as mentioned, you're going to play queen h4. So you can take it from there. So back in this position, straight after bishop taking in c6 and pawn taking back, what if king to h2 instead of knight to c3, which doesn't work? Okay, here's how you play this game. Knight e6, rook to g1 seems to be making perfect sense. f6, we're going to open the file for the rook. f4, defending the f5, the e5 square. Fine, take, that's fine for us. c5, crashing the center. And nothing stops us from taking this, and that's going to be a completely game over, right? If pawn takes, then you can just recapture with the bishop, and yeah, this king is not going to last long, as you can tell. So back in this position, straight after playing a bishop back to b6, and now we're looking at the novelty, which is bishop e3, the move we haven't seen so far. We know we need to castle. What if white plays h3 and stops all of our threats? Because here's the thing, right? This is the weakness to remember. The d4 pawn is the weakness, the backward pawn of the white player. What if h3 preventing bishop g4? Fine, f6. And now here's the thing. Our opponent, let's say castle. Since white has decided to castle, we're going to play f5 then. Change of plans. Because we want to play f4. And that's, there's nothing that can be done to stop it. Knight c3 developing, f4, the bishop has to go. Bishop to c1, bishop to e6, develop. And now, two options. Well, if the bishop takes and you take back, rook to d1, but then knight to g5. And you're gonna be able to take this and then be able to take this as well. And that cannot really be stopped. And here, what about rook to e1? Doubling the attack on the knight. Rook e1 instead of bishop takes e6. Fine, now you can take this pawn. Once again, this is free, even though it doesn't look like. Because when the knight takes the pawn, knight f2. Hehe. And now, there's an attack on the queen. Nothing can be done here. Let's say, for example, queen to d2. To put more attack over that and also keep defending the knight. Well, fine. Knight takes here, check. Pawn takes back. Bishop takes here. We've got all the threats of the world. This king is not going to last long. This is all obviously created by the engine. It's not a made-up sacrifice. I will never say it to you if it wasn't a real thing. So here, after knight f2, what if the king does take the knight, accepts the sacrifice? Well, now queen to h4, check. And let's say a move like king f1 is met with f3. This is game over. Right? The knight can't take, because then there's a queen f2 threat of checkmate, okay? So king f1 is not possible. You might argue, what about king to e2 after the check? Trying to maybe go and find a shelter somewhere. Well, okay, you take this one. You're winning that piece. You're also going to be winning this pawn. So what about the queen takes back? You might argue f3. And you're attacking this queen. And you're going to win the queen. There's nothing that can be done to stop it. What about king to d3? Well, then the rook will fall in a more dramatic way than the Berlin Wall in 1989. So from the start, so if you can hear this sound, by the way, it's like I'm recording this by the waterfalls. Pawn takes, and now bishop c4, the usual annoying gambit, bishop c5. What happens when they castle straight away instead of c3? Fine, this allows us to play d6, and we have seen it in the past, but only briefly. White can play c3 now, but this different move order allows you to play the move bishop to g4. When this happens, you are already on easy street. Nothing to do now. What about h3 for instance? Fine, take. And now the best move is queen to f6. Invite the trades. Don't play knight e5. It's a bit of a dopamine move. You don't need to trade everything. Queen to g3. If white swaps with us, we're doing better actually. Because remember, we're up a pawn. Queen to g6. We're really desperate for swap. We want to take with this pawn and open the file for the rook. Queen f3 once again. Fine. Knight f6. So if they don't trade, you get going like that. Knight d2. Knight e5. So it's attacking the queen and the knight. So queen e2 is the move. And now you take this pawn. Pawn takes back. Long castle. And now a move like rook to b1. Going on the right square, well, knight to h5, position evaluated, has been evaluated as if black was up a piece for a while already. Knight h5, the idea of going to f4 is kind of unstoppable. From there you shall conquer glory. So from the start. Now let's stop looking at the gambit for a second and let's look at the traditional Scotch game when they take back, bishop c5, bishop e3, queen f6, and now what happens after the immediate knight b5 move. Now here, don't worry about the fork in c7, you just gotta take this bishop and now you're threatening checkmate, so they have to take you back. If they don't, knight c7 and king d8, you're attacking the knight while still making a threat of checkmate, so you're winning a piece. So after pawn takes, then you're gonna make a check. G3, queen e4, this is all theory, knight check, king moves, and now knight takes rook. As we know, we don't take the rook now, we play knight f6. This is important for one reason. Now, in the past, we've been through rook g1, we've seen a lot of stuff. Queen to d6 now. Now we have to take this rook. You don't have to worry about this check, because then when you move the king, there's actually no threats going on. The problem is that I've encountered this move in a blitz game recently, so that's why I wanted to make a video about this. Knight to d2, the idea of castling long, and I started feeling under tremendous pressure here. What to do? This is the key move. Knight to e8. The queen will have to go. Now, if the queen goes to d3, for instance, you just take this pawn for free. And when the king castles, you just take this pawn for free. There's no compensation. This king is safe as ever. If instead of queen d3, after the attack on the queen goes to f4, where she will be protecting these pawns a little bit more, you still take this one. And after castle, queen h6, looking for a trade, obviously. The trade might not occur. However, queen f7, knight d6. And yeah, we'll leave the line here. With black is just like positions evaluated rightfully that black is completely winning. We will have to drop this. Let's say the queen will have to go back, but you can carry on and play rook e8 and put pressure on the weaknesses. Besides, you've got pass pawns. You've got a pass pawn to be produced on the king side. The last line, and then we're going to close this video, is the following. So after d4, take, knight takes, bishop c5, bishop e3, queen f6, the traditional, and then c3. And now we play queen g6 with the attack on that pawn. In the variation where they protected when they protect the pawn in e4 with the knight, we've seen everything. We've seen f3, we've seen bishop d3, queen f3 in the past. The one with knight d2, we have seen it. We know we play knight f6 now. But now they can play the move knight b5, and this changes things, because now the queen is in g6. We no longer have this attack on this piece, winning this piece with the threat of mate. What to do now? You still need to take this bishop. However, okay, there's two things that can happen. One of them is knight takes pawn, but now you just go here, and the player has to take the rook, and now you just take this knight, and after queen takes back, now check. You're winning that pawn. Bishop blocks in order not to trade pieces, because also this knight is trapped, so it's going to be lost. Rook e8 stops white from castling, so f3 is the only move now to maybe do king f2 and then the rook manually castle. However, queen e5 staying relevant, and white cannot castle. What about queen f2? King f2, queen c5. And now what to do? If king to g3, the game is completely over after knight to h5. This is leading to a checkmate very soon, or to the opponent having to sacrifice loads of material. If instead king back to e1, then simply knight to d5. We're going to close the line here. You're threatening knight e3, glorious move. This knight is trapped. You're threatening the knight to g2. Our opponent has lost the right to castle. There is, but either way, apart from that, if you ask the engine now to play the next moves, it will be basically b6 and bishop a6, finalizing the attack on that bishop. We're gonna leave it there. Position is evaluated -001, so I guess black is completely winning. No, I'm kidding. Like, it's much more than that. It's like -6 at this point. Anyway, back in this position, straight after taking the pawn in e3, we went through knight c7 and so on. What if white recaptures this bishop, renewing the threat on c7 properly this time? Fine, we have to play king d8. And after queen to f3 developing, putting more defense over e4, d6. And now castling long is not possible because bishop g4 wins material. So h3 by white to stop it. Well, now you play knight to e5. That's how you play this. Queen f4 staying relevant to put more defense over e4. However, knight f2 d7 is the move now. And after castling, this is the most solid white can possibly play, although it's still a faulty variation. So now we're going to punish it. f6, and now that's it. You're going to have to take it from there. You're going to play against the isolated pawn. G4 by white, the idea of trying to develop somehow. Knight to c5. And now you're threatening knight d3, winning the game because it wins the queen. King to b1. These are all best moves in a faulty variation. Bishop to d7, attacking this knight. Simply developing anyway. A move like, let's make an example before we close this line. Knight to c4 could be a tricky idea. I've encountered this personally. It's nothing special. There are no other moves that make much sense if you think about it. This knight cannot really move because you got double attack on e4. This bishop cannot really go to g2 because it loses control of the knight. This knight can't go to b3. I mean, you can take it, but then you know the opponent will lose the control of the square e4, threatening horrible discovered checks. This is a tricky attempt they tried against me. Knight c4 here. You can take this one for free. However, they can take here. And now there's an attack on the queen, there's a released attack on the bishop. You just take back with the f-pawn. Yeah, there's nothing here, although it looks kind of scary. So yeah, we're going to leave it there.